The wind howled across the frozen landscape of Antarctica like an angry beast that never slept. Dr. Moore pulled her thick jacket around her body and stared at the computer screens in front of her. She had been working at the Lake Vostok research station for 3 years now, studying the ancient ice that covered this forgotten corner of the world. But in all her time here, she had never seen readings like these. "Daniel, come look at this," she called to her colleague across the small room. Daniel Park walked over, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. He was a quiet man who spoke only when he had something important to say. He looked at the screen and his eyes grew wide. "That pulse again," he said. "Every 4 hours, same exact frequency." Nodded slowly. 6 months ago, their drilling equipment had discovered something impossible. 2 kilometers beneath the ice, hidden in frozen darkness for millions of years, there was a structure, not a natural formation, not anything that should exist. The walls were made of a material that no scientist could identify. Strange symbols covered every surface, and those symbols seemed to move when you looked at them too long. The discovery had changed everything. Within weeks, the station had filled with military personnel and government agents. Scientists with specialties had never heard of arrived in the middle of the night. Everyone asked questions. No one gave answers. Commander Cole of the United States Navy had taken charge of the operation 3 weeks ago. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of secrets too heavy for normal people to know. He stood behind now, watching the screen with an expression she could not read. "The pulse is getting stronger," said. "Whatever is down there, it is waking up." Picked up his satellite phone without saying a word. He walked to the corner of the room and spoke in a voice too low for anyone to hear. Watched him for a moment, then turned back to her screens. She had a feeling that the world was about to change in ways none of them could imagine. 12,000 kilometers away from Earth, in the cold emptiness of space, a massive warship dropped out of hyperspace. The vessel was called the Ascendant Blade, and it belonged to the Dominion, an empire that had conquered half the galaxy over 10,000 years of endless war. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge, looking at the small blue planet on his display screen. He felt nothing but contempt for what he saw. Earth was a primitive world, home to creatures who had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. They had no defenses worth mentioning, no technology that could threaten even the smallest Dominion patrol ship. Conquering them would be like stepping on insects. "Scans are complete, Commander," his tactical officer reported. "Class 4 civilization, pre-interstellar development. Their most advanced weapons are nuclear devices. They pose no threat to our forces." Smiled. He had done this 1,000 times before. The Dominion would broadcast their surrender demand. The primitives would panic, maybe try to fight back with their pathetic weapons. Then the harvesting would begin. Resources would be extracted. Useful specimens would be collected for labor and experimentation. The rest would be eliminated. It was efficient. It was profitable. It was the Dominion way. "Begin standard subjugation protocol," ordered. "Broadcast the surrender demand on all frequencies. Tell them they have 48 hours to submit." "Commander," the voice of his science officer cut through the bridge like a knife. There was something in that voice that made turn sharply. Fear. His science officer was afraid. "I am detecting an anomalous energy signature on the planet's surface," the officer continued. "Southern continent. The wavelength is very faint, but it matches something in our historical database." Felt a chill run down his spine. What does it match? "The readings from the Forbidden Archive, the ones we are ordered never to investigate." Moved quickly to the science station. His fingers flew across the controls, pulling up records that were older than the Dominion itself. Records that described a war fought billions of years ago, a conflict so devastating that it had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. And in those records, there was a warning about beings called Guardians. The text appeared on his screen, written in a language so ancient that few could still read it, was one of those few. If you find this signature, the words read, flee immediately. Do not engage. Do not investigate. Do not attempt communication. The guardian sleeps beneath the surface. Pray to whatever gods you worship that it never wakes, for if it does, no power in this galaxy can protect you from its judgment. His blood turned to ice in his veins. He had conquered worlds without mercy. He had destroyed civilizations without a second thought. But as he read those words, he felt something he had not felt since he was a child. He felt true terror. All ships, he commanded, his voice barely steady. Hold position. Do not approach the planet. Repeat, do not approach under any circumstances. His tactical officers stared at him in confusion. Sir, they are primitives. They cannot possibly harm us. Our fleet could conquer this world in hours. Did not answer. He was still staring at the screen, at the faint energy signature pulsing from beneath the Antarctic ice. That signature was growing stronger by the minute. Whatever slept beneath that frozen continent was beginning to stir. On Earth watched her instruments go wild. The pulse had changed. It was no longer a regular heartbeat. It was accelerating, building towards something. "Everyone out," shouted. "Evacuate the drilling platform now." But did not move. She could not move. Something was happening inside her mind. A voice, ancient and vast, was forming words in her thoughts, words that were not sound but pure meaning. "I am awake." The ground beneath her feet began to shake. 2 kilometers below, in a chamber that had been sealed for 65 million years, a pair of eyes opened. They were not human eyes. They belonged to something older than humanity, older than the dinosaurs, older than almost anything in the known universe. The guardian of Earth was rising. And across the galaxy, in every corner of known space, the powerful and the mighty felt that awakening like a cold hand gripping their hearts. Something had changed, something that would reshape the balance of power forever. The age of humanity hiding in the shadows was over. Ready or not, Earth was about to take its place on the galactic stage. The ice cracked like thunder as the ancient being rose from its prison, stood frozen at her station, unable to look away from the screens that showed impossible images. The structure beneath the ice was opening. Walls that had stood for 65 million years were moving apart like doors welcoming home a long-lost master. Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. "We need to go, now." But resisted. "Look at it," she whispered. "Look at what we found." On the screen, illuminated by the faint lights of their remote probe, stood a figure. It was shaped like a human, but it was not human. It could never be human. The body was made of metal that shimmered with inner light. The face was too perfect, too symmetrical, like a sculptor's dream of what humanity could become. And it was massive. The probe's instruments estimated the figure at 30 meters tall, standing in a chamber of crystal that pulsed with the same rhythm they had been detecting for months. Then the figure opened its eyes. Light exploded outward. Not ordinary light, but something that passed through walls and stone and ice as if they were nothing. Felt it wash through her body, through her mind, through every cell of her being. For one terrible and beautiful moment, she glimpsed something beyond human understanding. A consciousness so vast that her own thoughts were like whispers lost in a hurricane. Then came the voice. It did not speak in words that traveled through air. The voice formed directly in her thoughts, bypassing her ears entirely. And somehow she knew that every human on Earth was hearing the same message at the same moment. "I am awake." The ground shook violently, fell to her knees, and Daniel crashed into the wall beside her. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Emergency lights painted everything in red. In Washington, President Lisa watched chaos unfold on every screen in the Situation Room. Every television channel in the world had stopped their normal broadcasts. Every radio frequency carried the same signal. Every computer, every phone, every network device displayed the same message. A being called the Guardian was rising from Antarctica. It meant humanity no harm. It had been placed on Earth to protect them. "Get me our Antarctic team," the president ordered. "I need to know what we are dealing with." But no one could give her answers. No one on Earth had ever dealt with anything like this. In space, Fleet Commander watched his display screens with growing horror. The faint energy signature from Earth was no longer faint. It was blazing like a newborn star, growing stronger by the second. Power readings climbed beyond anything the Dominion had ever recorded, beyond anything in the historical archives, beyond anything that should be possible. "Sir," his tactical officer stammered, "the Guardian is emerging." The Antarctic ice split open. From the wound in Earth's surface rose something that made the Dominion warships look like children's toys. A humanoid figure of living metal and light, kilometers tall, ascending through the atmosphere as easily as a bird taking flight. Gravity seemed to have no hold on it. The laws of physics that governed lesser beings simply did not apply. The Guardian turned its attention toward the edge of the solar system, toward the assembled fleet, and felt the weight of that gaze like a physical force pressing down on his chest. "All ships," he commanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Emergency jump, get us out of here, now." His officers scrambled to obey. Hyperspace engines powered up across the fleet. 47 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet, prepared to flee from a single being. They were not fast enough. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, 31 Dominion warships stopped existing. They were not destroyed in any conventional sense. There was no explosion, no debris, no evidence that they had ever been there at all. They simply ceased to be, erased from reality by a power that all understanding. The remaining 16 ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying their terrified crews away from Earth as fast as their engines could take them. Sat in his command chair, hands shaking, staring at the empty space where most of his fleet had been moments before. "The Guardian did not even try," his science officer said quietly. "The energy expenditure for that attack was minimal. It put less effort into destroying our ships than we used to open a door." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. The most powerful fleet the Dominion had ever assembled had been swatted aside like insects, and the being that had done it had not considered them worth any real effort. On Earth, the Guardian settled back into Antarctica. It did not return to its chamber beneath the ice. Instead, it rested on the frozen surface, a giant of metal and light watching over the planet it had protected for millions of years. Made her way outside the damaged research station. The cold wind bit at her face, but she barely noticed. She was looking up at the impossible figure that had changed everything. "Why us?" she asked aloud. She did not expect an answer. But an answer came. The voice in her mind, ancient and somehow gentle, spoke again. "Because you were chosen. Long ago, before your kind existed, beings of great power seeded the universe with life. They watched over their creations, guiding them, protecting them. You call these beings gods in your stories. We called them the architects. They saw potential in your world. They saw potential in the small creatures that would one day become humanity. And so they placed me here, to watch, to wait, to protect you until you were ready to protect yourselves." Felt tears freezing on her cheeks. Ready for what? The Guardian was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something in its voice that might have been sorrow. "For what is coming, the enemy I was created to fight. They have slept as I have slept, but they are beginning to stir, and when they wake, even I may not be enough to stop them." Across the galaxy, the footage of Earth's Guardian spread like wildfire. The Dominion, the most feared military power in known space, had been humiliated by a primitive world they had intended to conquer in hours. Their emperor demanded revenge. His admirals told him the truth. If the Guardian had considered them a real threat, the entire Dominion civilization would have ceased to exist. In the Confederacy of Free Worlds, celebrations erupted on 1,000 planets. Species that had lived in fear of Dominion conquest for centuries finally had hope. Earth, overlooked and ignored Earth, had a protector that made the mighty Dominion look like children playing at war. Diplomatic ships launched toward Earth from every corner of the galaxy. Trade delegations prepared proposals. Military alliances were drafted. Everyone wanted to be friends with the world that had a guardian. But in the dark places between stars, in dimensions that existed outside normal space, something ancient stirred in response to the Guardian's awakening. Something hungry. Something that had been sealed away for billions of years. The seals were beginning to crack. And Earth, so newly awakened to the reality of the universe, had no idea what was coming. 6 months had passed since the Guardian's awakening, and Earth was no longer the same world. Stood in the observation deck of Unity Station, humanity's first orbital facility capable of receiving visitors from other planets. Through the massive windows, she could see ships of every shape and size approaching the docking bays. Some were sleek and silver. Others looked like floating crystals. A few resembled living creatures more than machines. Each one carried representatives from species that humanity had never known existed. The Confederacy of Free Worlds had kept their promises. Technology that would have taken humans centuries to develop had been shared freely. Clean energy systems replaced the old power plants on every continent. Medical advances doubled human within months. Communication devices allowed instant contact with any point in the galaxy. Humanity had leaped forward thousands of years in the space of half a year. But not everyone was celebrating. "They are buying insurance," said General Santos, standing beside and watching the same ships with suspicious eyes. "As long as the Guardian protects us, we are the safest place in the galaxy. They are not being generous. They are being smart." Nodded slowly. She had thought the same thing many times. The alien delegations were friendly, almost too friendly. They offered gifts and knowledge with smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Everyone wanted to be close to the world with the Guardian. Everyone wanted protection from what might come next. "Have you spoken with it lately?" asked. "Does it tell you anything about what is really happening?" Had become something no human had ever been before. She was the Guardian's voice, the one person it spoke to directly and regularly. No one understood why she had been chosen. Perhaps it was because she had been there at the awakening. Perhaps it was something else. But the Guardian trusted her, and that made her the most important person on Earth in ways that still made her uncomfortable. "It does not tell me everything," she admitted. "It speaks in riddles sometimes, shows me images I do not fully understand, but I know it is worried. Something is coming, something that made the architects build the Guardians in the first place." Ambassador Christopher joined them at the window. He had been a nobody before the awakening, a minor diplomat who processed paperwork in a government office. Now he represented all of humanity to the galactic community. The responsibility had aged him, but it had also given him purpose. "The Confederacy Council wants a formal alliance," he said. "Mutual defense treaty. If anyone attacks Earth, they help us. If anyone attacks them, we help them." "We do not have anything to offer," said. "Our military is a joke compared to theirs. What could we possibly contribute to a galactic war?" "The Guardian," Christopher answered simply. "They do not want our ships or our soldiers. They want the Guardian to fight for them if the Dominion attacks. They are terrified of another invasion, and they see us as their shield." Shook her head. "The Guardian is not a weapon we can aim at our enemies. It protects Earth. I do not know if it would fight for other worlds." "Then we need to find out," Christopher said. "Because right now, half the galaxy thinks we control the most powerful force in existence. If they find out we do not actually control anything, our value drops to zero." In the Dominion capital, far across the galaxy, Emperor III sat on a throne made from the bones of conquered species. He had taken his father's name after the humiliation at Earth, a reminder to himself and everyone else of what the Dominion had lost. The original, the fleet commander who had fled from the Guardian, had been executed publicly. His failure could not be allowed to stand. But execution did not change the facts. The Dominion had been exposed as weak. Species they had conquered for centuries now whispered about rebellion. Trade partners demanded new terms. Military allies questioned whether the Dominion could protect them anymore. "We need to destroy that planet," the Emperor said to his advisors. "Wipe it from existence. Show the galaxy that the Dominion is still to be feared." His chief admiral shook his head carefully. "Your Majesty, our analysis suggests that a direct attack on Earth would fail completely. The Guardian's power exceeds anything we possess, anything anyone possesses. If we attack and lose again, the Dominion will fall apart within a year." The Emperor slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. "Then find another way. I do not care how. Poison them, corrupt them, turn them against each other. Find the Guardian's weakness. There must be something." "There may be one option," said a voice from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, cloaked in darkness that seemed to move with its own will. The Emperor's advisors backed away in fear. They knew this figure. Everyone in the Dominion knew this figure. The shadow broker traded in secrets and forbidden knowledge. Dealing with him was dangerous, but he always delivered results. "Speak," the Emperor commanded. "The Guardians were created to fight something," the shadow broker said. "Something that nearly destroyed all life in the universe billions of years ago. That enemy was sealed away, trapped in a prison between dimensions. But seals weaken over time, and there are ways to speed up that weakening." The Emperor leaned forward. "You are suggesting we release this enemy, something that nearly destroyed the universe." "I am suggesting that the enemy of your enemy can be useful. Let the Guardian fight its true battle. Let it exhaust itself against a foe worthy of its power. Then, when it is weakened or destroyed, Earth will be helpless. The Dominion can take what it wants." The Emperor considered this. It was insane. It was dangerous beyond measure. It could destroy not just Earth but the entire galaxy. But it could also restore the Dominion's glory. "Do it," he said. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, do it." On Earth, the Guardian stirred, felt its unease like a cold wind blowing through her mind. "Something is wrong," she said aloud. Looked at her sharply. "What kind of wrong?" Closed her eyes, reaching out to the vast consciousness that watched over her world. Images flooded her mind. Dark spaces between dimensions. Ancient seals cracking like old ice. Something massive and hungry pressing against barriers that had held for billions of years. "It is beginning," she whispered. "The thing the Guardian was made to fight, someone is waking it up." In the depths of space, in a place that was not quite space at all, the first crack appeared in a seal that had held for longer than the stars had burned. Through that crack, something looked out. Something that had waited in darkness since before the Earth existed. Something that saw the little blue planet with its guardian standing watch. And it smiled with a mouth made of shadows and hunger. Soon it thought, very soon. The harvesters were coming, and this time there would be no architects to stop them. The darkness came without warning. One moment the edge of the galaxy was normal space filled with stars and planets and the quiet hum of distant civilizations. The next moment, something tore through reality like a knife through paper. A wave of living shadow poured through the wound, spreading across the void with terrible speed. It did not move like ships. It moved like a flood, like a plague, like death itself reaching out to claim everything in its path. The harvesters had arrived. Felt them before any sensor detected their presence. She sat up in her bed in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sweat cold on her skin. The Guardian's voice thundered in her mind with an urgency she had never heard before. "They are here, the enemy I was created to fight, the devourers of worlds, the end of all things." She ran to the communication center, still in her sleeping clothes, and found chaos already spreading. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 3 star systems on the outer rim had gone silent. No distress calls, no survivors, just emptiness where thriving civilizations had existed hours before. General Santos was already at the command center when arrived. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "We have confirmation from Confederacy scouts," said. "The harvesters are real. They are consuming everything in their path. At current speed, they will reach Earth in approximately 3 months." 3 months, repeated. That is not enough time. It has to be enough, because there is no other option. The Guardian rose from Antarctica for the second time since its awakening, but its posture was different now. Before, it had faced the Dominion fleet with casual confidence, like a giant brushing away insects. Now it stood tense and ready, like a warrior preparing for the battle of its life. "I must speak to your leaders," it broadcast to and through her to the world. "All of them, every nation, every faction. There is no time for your usual conflicts. If humanity does not stand together now, humanity will not stand at all." Within hours, every government on Earth had joined a massive video conference. Presidents and prime ministers, dictators and kings, corporate leaders and military commanders, all of them watched as relayed the Guardian's words. "The harvesters are not a species in the way you understand species," she explained, translating the Guardian's message. "They are more like a force of nature, a cosmic phenomenon that feeds on the energy of living worlds. The architects, the beings who created the Guardians, fought them to a standstill billions of years ago. They could not destroy the harvesters completely. They could only seal them away, trap them in a prison between dimensions. And now that prison is breaking," President Lisa said. "How did this happen?" Hesitated. The Guardian had shown her the truth, but it was a truth that would anger many. Someone broke the seals deliberately. The Dominion. They thought they could use the harvesters as a weapon against Earth. They did not understand what they were releasing. Anger rippled through the assembled leaders. But there was no time for blame or revenge. The enemy was coming, and it would devour Dominion and Earth alike. "What can we do?" a European prime minister asked. "If these things nearly destroyed the universe before, what chance do we have?" The architects were few, said. There were perhaps 100 of them in all of existence, but humanity numbers in billions, and the Guardian believes that matters. The architects built the Guardians to protect young species until those species could protect themselves. The Guardian has studied us. It believes we are ready. "Ready for what?" General Santos asked. "To fight, to build weapons that can hurt the harvesters, to stand beside the Guardian in battle. We are not meant to be protected forever. We are meant to grow beyond the need for protection. The Guardian believes that time has come." The next 3 months were unlike anything in human history. Every nation on Earth put aside their differences and worked together toward a single goal. Factories that had built cars and appliances now built weapons designed by the Guardian itself. Shipyards constructed vessels based on technology shared by the Confederacy, but powered by energy patterns derived from the Guardian's own structure. Scientists worked around the clock, learning in weeks what should have taken centuries. The Confederacy sent volunteers and advisors. Even former enemies in the galaxy set aside old grudges to face the common threat. Ships arrived from 100 different worlds, crewed by beings who looked nothing like humans but who stood ready to fight beside them. At the center of it all was, she no longer slept more than a few hours at a time. The Guardian's consciousness was constantly in her mind, guiding her, teaching her, showing her how to coordinate the massive effort that might save everything. "You are pushing yourself too hard," Daniel said one evening, finding her slumped over a console in the weapons development facility. He had stayed with her through everything, the quiet friend who asked for nothing and gave everything. "There is no choice," said. "If we fail, there will be no one left to rest. The Guardian could do this without us. It fought the harvesters before." Shook her head. "It fought with the architects before. There were 100 Guardians across the galaxy. Now there is only one. It cannot win this alone. That is why it woke us. That is why it has been preparing us. We are supposed to be the help that the architects could not provide anymore. Daniel sat beside her, and if we fail anyway, looked at him with tired eyes. Then the universe becomes very dark, very quiet for a very long time, until something new grows from the ashes. The Guardian says that is how it works. Life ends. Life begins again. The cycle continues. I prefer this cycle, Daniel said. Managed a small smile. So do I. On the edge of the solar system, humanity's first true battle fleet assembled. 200 ships, crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth. They were smaller than Dominion warships, less experienced than Confederacy vessels, but they carried weapons that had never been tested, based on principles that no other species had ever mastered. Because the Guardian had given them something no one else possessed, it had shared the secret of its own power. The energy that made the Guardian invincible could be channeled into weapons that humans could wield. It would not make them equal to the Guardian. Nothing could do that, but it would make them dangerous. For the first time in billions of years, the harvesters would face prey that could fight back. General Santos stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the fleet form up around her. She had spent her whole career preparing for wars that never came. Now the greatest war in history was about to begin, and she felt strangely calm. All ships report ready, her tactical officer announced. Santos nodded. She looked at the darkness gathering beyond Neptune's orbit. The harvesters were close now. She could almost feel their hunger. Signal the Guardian, she said. Tell it we are ready to fight beside it. Tell it that Earth stands. And in Antarctica, the Guardian rose for the final battle. The battle began near Jupiter's orbit. The harvesters came as a wave of living darkness, spreading across space like ink spilling through water. They had no ships in any normal sense. They were the ships. They were the weapons. They were hunger given form, a force that had devoured countless civilizations since before the stars were born. General Santos watched them approach on her and felt her heart pound in her chest. She had studied every war in human history. She had trained for decades to lead soldiers into battle, but nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for facing the end of everything. All ships, she commanded, engage. 200 human vessels opened fire. Energy weapons based on the Guardian's own power tore into the darkness. For the first time in billions of years, the harvesters felt pain. The effect was electric. The wave of shadow recoiled, surprised by resistance it had not expected. Pieces of darkness broke away and dissolved into nothing. The harvesters screamed, a sound that traveled through space as a pulse of pure rage that every being in the solar system felt in their bones. We hurt them, Santos said, her voice filled with wonder. We actually hurt them. But the harvesters recovered quickly. They were ancient beyond measure and they learned fast. The wave reformed, denser now, more careful. It began to flow around the human ships, trying to surround them, to cut them off from retreat. Evasive maneuvers, Santos ordered. Do not let them encircle us. The battle became a desperate dance of fire and shadow. Human ships darted through the darkness, weapons blazing, trying to carve a path through the enemy. The harvesters pressed in from every direction, seeking to overwhelm them with sheer mass. 63 human ships died in the first 18 hours. They were not destroyed gently. The harvesters consumed them, crew and all, absorbing their energy into the endless hunger that drove them. But for every ship that fell, the remaining vessels fought harder. They had seen that the enemy could bleed. That knowledge was worth more than any weapon. And then the Guardian joined the battle. It came like a comet of light, blazing through the solar system with power that dwarfed everything else in existence. The Guardian struck the heart of the harvester swarm with the force of a dying star. Darkness exploded outward. Pieces of shadow the size of moons were torn apart and scattered across space. Watched from the command ship, tears streaming down her face. She felt every blow the Guardian struck. She felt its pain as the harvesters fought back. The connection between them had grown so strong that she experienced the battle as if she were fighting it herself. And she felt something else, something the Guardian was trying to hide from her. It was weakening. The battle raged for 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting, of ships dying and crew members sacrificing themselves to buy time for their comrades. 3 days of the Guardian pouring its ancient power into the struggle, burning through reserves it had built up over 65 million years. On the 4th day, demanded the truth. "You are dying," she said, standing alone in her quarters, speaking to the presence in her mind. "You cannot win this, not alone." The Guardian was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was gentler than she had ever heard. "I was never meant to win alone. The architects built us to protect young species until they could protect themselves. You were always supposed to grow beyond us. I have watched your kind for 65 million years. I have seen you survive extinction. I have seen you overcome every obstacle. You are stubborn. Beautifully, impossibly stubborn. That is why the architects chose Earth. That is why I have faith in what humanity will become. But if you die, who will protect us? You will protect yourselves, and you will protect others. The torch passes. That is how it has always worked. The architects protected the galaxy until the Guardians were ready. The Guardians have protected young species until they were ready. Now it is your turn." Felt her heart breaking. "We are not ready." "You are more ready than you know. Look at what you have done in 3 months. Look at what you have built. Look at what you have become. Humanity has taken its first steps into the galaxy. Soon you will run, and then you will fly. And one day, perhaps, you will build guardians of your own to protect species that are just beginning their journey." The 5th day of the battle brought the final confrontation. The Harvester Core, the central mass of the swarm, had reached Mars. It was larger than any planet in the solar system, a sphere of absolute darkness that consumed all light that touched it. If it reached Earth, nothing could stop it. The Guardian met it in the space between Mars and Earth. Was on the command ship when the Guardian broadcast its final message. It spoke not just to her, but to every human, every being on Earth, every creature in the solar system that could understand its words. "Children of Earth, I have protected you for longer than your species has existed. It has been my honor and my purpose, but now my purpose is ending. The rest is up to you. Remember what you are. Remember what you can become. Never stop reaching for the stars. Never stop dreaming of tomorrow. And know that I am proud, so very proud of the people you have chosen to be." Then the Guardian did something that no living being had ever witnessed. It gathered all of its remaining power, all of the energy it had accumulated over 65 million years, and released it in a single devastating pulse. The explosion was visible from Earth. For 3 days and 3 nights, a second sun burned in the sky. The Harvester Core was torn apart from within, its darkness scattered across the solar system in fragments too small to threaten anyone. When the light faded, both the Guardian and the Harvesters were gone. Wept, so did billions of others across the planet and beyond. The being that had protected them, the ancient warrior that had given them time to grow, had sacrificed itself for their future. But even through her grief, felt something stirring in her chest, a warmth, a whisper that might have been memory or might have been something more. "You are ready," it seemed to say. "You have always been ready. Now show the universe what humanity can do." 1 year later, a new Guardian rose from the ice of Antarctica. It was smaller than the original, less powerful, but it was built by human hands, guided by human minds, powered by human hearts. It incorporated everything the first Guardian had taught them, everything they had learned in the desperate months of the war. Stood at the dedication ceremony, watching it ascend into orbit. She was no longer just a scientist. She was the director of the Guardian Project, leading the effort to protect not just Earth but any world that needed help. Ambassador Christopher gave the speech that would be remembered for centuries. The Guardian told us we were meant to replace it. We have not done that. We are not arrogant enough to believe we could, but we have made a beginning. From this day forward, Earth does not just have a protector. Earth is a protector. Any species that needs shelter, any world that faces destruction, any people who have nowhere else to turn, we will be there. In the Dominion, the Emperor watched the broadcast with something close to fear. His plan to destroy Earth had failed completely. The Harvesters were gone. The Guardian was gone. But humanity remained, and humanity was building new Guardians. The galaxy was changing, and the Dominion's place in it was no longer certain. In the Confederacy, celebrations erupted across 1,000 worlds. Earth had proven itself. The primitives who had been overlooked for so long had stood against the darkness and won. They were no longer primitives. They were equals. They were friends. They were family. And on Earth, humanity looked up at the stars with new eyes. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of wonders they were only beginning to understand. There would be other threats, other challenges, other battles to fight. But they were not afraid. They had faced the Eaters of Worlds and survived. They had lost their guardian but found the strength to become guardians themselves. The galaxy would never forget what they had done. And the galaxy would never stop watching to see what they would do next. Stood alone on the Antarctic ice, in the place where the first guardian had slept for 65 million years. The wind was cold, but she did not feel it. She was thinking of everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty sky, "for everything." And somewhere, in the vast spaces between stars, in a place where matter and energy meant nothing at all, something that was no longer quite the Guardian smiled. Its children were ready, its purpose was complete, and the future was brighter than it had dared to hope.